Well, the time is 9 o'clock. We'll go ahead and call this academics ad hoc MSIP 6 committee meeting to order. Ms. Kendall.
Okay, so today we're going to be going over a component of MSIP 6 that we have talked about previously, and that is our social and emotional index is what we are calling it. So I introduced that when we went over the entire continuous school improvement plan that we submitted to the state. And by the way, we have an embargoed version of our 2022 APR, and we can't discuss it because it's embargoed. But one thing from a general standpoint that I can share is for the continuous improvement plan that we sent to the state, we got all of our points. So we got 100% on that. So that was something that was really good for us. So I can share that, but I can't share some of the other stuff. But from that plan, if you remember, kind of the underpinning is that school boards are able to better understand how kids are doing academically and also their well-being. And so that was really part of why we developed the social and emotional index, so that we could kind of keep our pulse on, just like we do our balanced scorecard. It's a similar type of index, but it's really focused in on social and emotional well-being of our kids. And so attendance is a part of that, because we feel like attendance, when kids are in school, we have a better opportunity to provide them with multiple opportunities, from social workers to counselors to relationships with significant adults, with peers, and those components. So we feel like attendance is a part of social and emotional learning for kids and their well-being. So I want to just take one quick couple seconds, and I had invited one of our attendance interventionists to be here this morning, but with the school being closed and everything, and she's not a 12-month employee, so she's not here with us today. We had a great professional development session with our attendance interventionist on Monday. And one of the stories, and her name is Emily Bauman, and she's an attendance interventionist at Lafayette. One of the stories that she told, and you may recall, we are working with Dr. Harris out of Richmond, Virginia, and so she was there to support our learning. One of the stories we heard from Emily at Lafayette was she had reached out to a student that had been gone for 80 days. So think of, the first semester is 98 days. So she continued to make contact, and finally Grandma called. And so Grandma called and said, I don't know what to do. She needed help and all of these things. And so Emily provided that support, met with Grandma, met with the young student. And that student now has been in school for 2 weeks. And he comes in and meets with Emily every day to check in. So that was a big success story, because our attendance interventionists sometimes can get frustrated when they reach out to families. And so that was just a testament to their perseverance to continue to try to find and connect with families across our communities. So one of the things that this is how we track our attendance interventionists and the work they're doing with our families. And so this is something that Katie has helped us from a data lens. And so I'm not going to let it linger up there too long. There's some different names and things, but I want to point out that we really do try to track and ensure that we are finding out if the approaches that our attendance interventionists are making are actually having an impact. And the top three, the Scaife, Edison, and Pickett, that particular attendance interventionist, and we worked really hard to get everyone, we're going to try to get everyone to use this system with the same fidelity that particular attendance interventionist has been using. But you can see that the more school outreach that the attendance interventionists make, they get better results in terms of the school attendance rate. And so that you'll see on your one of your first handouts that I gave you guys is this one, and this is the work that the attendance interventionist did on Monday. They set SMART goals, kind of like our key performance indicators in our continuous school improvement plan. And so they did not leave our professional development until they had at least, 3 SMART goals, and then we're gonna follow up with them again in April to see how that, working those plans, how that affects our attendance by April. And so they worked really hard. It's not easy to develop SMART goals. It can be foreign even to folks that have, been working with goals for a long time. So I think that was really important work, and they're really looking at the themes of continuing to build relationships with our families, identifying family barriers. Like I've told you before, they've all been trained with the multiple agencies that we have in connecting families with resources. They will be increasing their use of the attendance tracker. And time management is something else that can be a difficult component. Knowledge of resources to share with families, and then they had some other options in there as well as reaching out to families. So just to kind of let you know, we are continuing to look at the impact of attendance interventionists. At the end of January, as you are probably aware, we were right at about 78%. Our goal is we want to be at least at 80%. So we're trending in the right direction. So, and because that's part of the social and emotional component, I wanted to share that with you. So if you are okay with it, I'm going to move to this particular slide.
Just to be clear, so.
Yes, I'm sorry, I should have stopped.
That's okay. SMART goals for educators really, but this is really applies more to the attendance interventions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So, and then you talk about professional development for the attendance interventions.
Yes.
And that, I'm sure, these steps are kind of broken down a little bit more.
Yeah.
On how you
Yes.
build relationships with families and things.
Yes, in fact, you may recall one of the times we went over that, and it was in this handbook. And so we actually role play with our attendance interventionists. Like, you have to be the parent, I have to be the attendance interventionist, and then we switch. And so we talk about how you build a relationship first, not even talking about school, connecting with families. What are your hopes and dreams for your children? Just connecting with folks, and then we go into when you have to potentially share some information about attendance that isn't all that rosy. And how do you kind of navigate that without it being, turning into a negative for that family? How do you connect with them? So.
It makes sense that you have to build rapport.
You have to build a
Before you
rapport.
accomplish anything. If there's no rapport, you don't,
Right, you can't
this
just,
is useless.
they're not little truancy officers.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
They really are, we really want them to be more engaging with the families, and they're working on that. And so, yeah, there's been a lot of training surrounding that.
So I would assume identifying family barriers, after you identify it, you probably have to break it down into what to do next.
Right.
Break it down into categories or.
Well, a lot of times what we've found out, a lot of it is often transportation. And so anything from, for instance, we found at Carden Park, the Mead building wasn't part of the bus route. And so we were getting a lot of calls there from single moms that didn't feel safe having their kids walk from the Mead building to Carden Park. Transportation issues, so the school district just wrapped the Mead building into the bus route, and that has helped those particular families. So that's just an example of transportation being a barrier. Healthcare is a barrier, and they have found that helping families, get connected to Medicaid and those components. So we learned about that, like at the United Way, how they can just connect those families, because oftentimes the families don't understand, like, how do you navigate the social services resources? And so they've been trained they went to the United Way meeting, they've been trained by Mosaic in a platform called Find Help. And so they can even open cases for families and connect them with a myriad of social service agencies and healthcare.
Well, culture then and language factor into that too, not figuring out how to work those.
Yes, yeah, and so those barriers as well. And so they work with the ESOL departments very closely, whether they're having things translated into Chiquis or Spanish, so that they can connect with those families too. So real quick, are there any more questions? Because that is it is a complex issue. Attendance is it's on its face, it just seems like a simple requirement, but it can be a more complex issue, a community issue, really.
Yeah, not to prolong this, but I'm just glad we're finally looking at this in detail, because I had a lot of questions previously.
Yeah.
What is the attendance? We know what attendance intervention is, the goal is.
Right.
But how do they go about achieving that goal?
Yeah. And so that'll be something too. I mean, I can bring in some examples of their SMART goals and how they're working those. So that you can even better understand like a daily operation. And so we're also gonna designate one day a week where they all get together and then they do home visits, because they have to pair up. And they're finding it hard to find people in the buildings that can go with them, because it's all hands on deck most of the time in the buildings. So, so moving to this, and we can still talk about attendance because this is part of it, but this is our social and emotional index. And I just want you to have this framework just kind of, just wanted to show it to you first, because I'm gonna back out of this and provide a little bit of detail on the construction of this particular index. But this is kind of what it looks like. But to get a little bit of detail on I wanted to show you about 7 minutes of a state board meeting surrounding social and emotional learning, and what was presented to the Missouri State Board of Education in terms of an approach to social and emotional learning in public schools. And while that is happening from a state perspective, there is a group of folks that are working on developing something potentially at a state level. And so both station I have talked with Darby Valenti, who was Teacher of the Year, and I forgot what year that was. It's been not terribly long ago, and she used to work for the district. And she is on this particular group that's presenting, that I'm going to have you guys listen to. And so we've been able to work with her to get a little more information as to kind of where the trajectory of social and emotional learning is going. And so the person that you'll hear speaking in this little clip is, if this all goes well, John, and her name is Dr. Bergen, and she is from the University of Missouri. And so she is the one that you'll hear talking. So this gives a little color to what we're going to talk about in terms of where did you come up with this index? How did you even begin to come up with it? So this relates to this particular slide that you guys should have at your stations. And that's really what the focus of this, and it's 7 minutes in length, it's not terribly long, and then we'll move back
I
into
did this slide 2 years ago, but it was filled with psychobabble at the time. So we have simplified this chart, but if you look at this, this chart comes directly out of the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistics Manual for Mental Health. What they've done is, historically, the DSM has only focused on impairment. But in the last 2 institutions, or in the last 2 DSMs, they've added in the back a spectrum of health. So it not only talks about severe impairment, but it breaks it down into moderate, mild, normal, healthy. So mental health is wanting to move in that direction of not just being dysfunction focused, but to also provide, we have the research of what it means to be healthy, and we need to start sharing that. So that's where this chart comes out of. It comes out of the back of the DSM with the goal of our field to move in that direction. You'll see here that it focuses on intrapersonal skills and interpersonal skills. And under the intrapersonal skills or self skills, it divides into two categories, identity and then self-motivation. And then under interpersonal skills, it divides into empathy and relationships. Or we would, in my profession, we would call those pro-social skills. Pro-social is the opposite of antisocial, which we're seeing rampant in our culture. So what we did with that mental health team and with the help of DESE is we crosswalked all of the social emotional learning curriculums out there with this psychologically sound balance chart. And what we discovered several things. The first thing we discovered is that there's thousands of curriculums out there for K through 6. There's a handful for middle school. There's nothing for high school. So that was informative. The second thing we discovered is that all of the social emotional learning curriculums are heavy on that first column, which we would call that healthy self-esteem would fall under that column. So a lot of emotion identification, emotion management. So a lot of the curriculums are heavy on that first column. And then they started branching out. They added in some self-motivation and added in some empathy. But under self-motivation, sometimes there's two parts to healthy self-motivation. The first is healthy goal setting, but the second is goal pursuit, or the capacity to evaluate, do my current actions move me toward my goal or away from my goal? So for example, I want to be an NBA player, so then is playing 7 hours of video games a day moving you toward that goal or away from that goal? So I spend a lot of time there in therapy with people. But both of those are a significant part of that intrapersonal skill set. The thing we also found with that crosswalk is empathy tended to either be lopsided or drifting into cultural definitions rather than sticking with psychologically sound definitions. So being overly simplistic, a psychologically sound definition is, I don't have to agree with you to have empathy for you. I just have to listen and seek to understand you. So when I have a pedophile in my office, which I've had, I don't agree with them, but they can walk away feeling as though I care for them because I'm seeking to understand why they've done that. So what we're taught as licensed mental health professionals is not to agree. That is not our empathy training. Our empathy training is seeking to understand. The most intriguing part of that crosswalk work is that in addition to that there's just a limit or no options for social emotional learning for middle school and high school, but the other significant part was all of the social emotional learning curriculum was deficit on those relational skills. It had a heavy emphasis on that identity or self-awareness. It might touch one, maybe two topics, but it was not the emphasis. So educationally, through our social emotional learning curriculum, we've been focused heavy on that intrapersonal skills, and we've just in the last 2 or 3 years started adding in some of those empathy. The fascinating thing about that, and again, this is just a drift that we did, but the fascinating thing is what research would show you is if you focus mostly on that identity or on that side without a healthy balance or even an emphasis on relational skills, it creates narcissistic tendencies. And we're wondering why we have a generation who has narcissistic tendencies. Right? So what we also know through mental health is that the quickest way toward mental health or the quickest way toward mental stability is healthy relationships. That's the number one treatment for trauma, is getting them healthy relationships, based off of attachment theory. So, and the fascinating thing is, the better your relationships, the less you're impacted by trauma, the better your relationships, the better you feel about yourself, right? So when you're trying to build healthy self-esteem, we're just going about it in a way that doesn't build healthy self-esteem. Another drift that we've had culturally, that's kind of drifted into education, is we're drifting toward trying to make kids happy rather than healthy. So just as physically, if I just hand you an ice cream cone, that'll make you happy, but it doesn't make you healthy. And we've started doing some of those concepts relationally and through a mental health lens. And so we're just trying to get back to what we know are psychologically sound principles, that if you do these, it brings out mental stability. So everyone wants our children to have healthy mental awareness, to be healthy, but unintentionally, some of the things we're doing is getting us just the opposite. So our recommendation is to move us toward healthy, and that's not anyone's fault. It was just piecemealed, and that's just kind of how it played out. Okay, so I'll give an example. So one of the first clients I had.
Okay, so that just kind of gives you a framework for what they're talking about when you look at this little chart. And I would have no capacity to explain this to you as a licensed mental health professional and someone that also is looking at this through the lens of education. So I wanted you to just hear, that was presented at a state board meeting. So really taking some of that information, talking again, like I said, with Darby Valenti, and there is one more thing that I also wanted to add, is this component, and they did present this too in the board meeting, this particular slide, and hopefully I can just kind of, if I move this over, it should pop up.
So helpful resources, things like that. So
practice and discipline. So
It's
our
showing
goal,
that it should just pop up, but it's
research
not.
and child
So
development.
you have it right here, this particular component. So really quick, this is another piece that is also added into this discussion about social and emotional well-being. So it just kind of reiterates what's already in that very simplistic chart that you see here. And so it talks about pro-social behavior, general pro-social behavior, harmonious, healthy, positive relationships, peaceful conflict resolution, collaborative cooperation and teamwork, inclusion of and respect for others, integrity and trustworthiness. Then it talks about emotional competence, emotional regulation, ability to control one's own emotions, effective perspective taking, ability to read and understand others' emotions, including empathy, self-management, self-control with responsible decision-making, set and achieve goals with perseverance, and then they also have healthy self-esteem. So these were, again, and you can see a tiny little logo there again is from the University of Missouri, because that's the folks that were presenting at this particular board meeting. So in light of that, and in light of the fact that there is not a prescribed social and emotional index, not a prescribed necessarily curriculum that's coming from the state, but nonetheless the continuous improvement plan that we submitted to the state asks that, how are we better understanding social and emotional health and well-being of our students? So we already, so I'm going to go back to our index, and by no means is this all encompassing. But what this does do, just like our balanced scorecard does for us, is it helps us better understand where we are, where our strengths are, and where our potential weaknesses or opportunities for improvement might be. And going forward, what else might we add to this index to continue to keep in pace with some of the learning, this is just learning that's going on at the state level right now, and how might we continue to add to this component so that we can continue to keep a pulse on this and be able to share this information with you at a level that's, somewhat easy to understand from an index perspective. So when we give the student Gallup poll, what we are looking at is a variety of different components. So some of these are really high level and some of these are more specific items. So for example, the percent of students that are feeling hopeful. So when we look at this data and we set our goals for the next year and we look at the overarching comparison set that Gallup gives us from a nationwide perspective, we set goals every year so that we can try to continue to improve. So this year, and I think I shared this with you already, is that our kids feel more hopeful this year. It's 41%, but at the same time, that is much improved. I think it's about 3 or 4% improved over having gone through the pandemic. So that is a positive metric. So this year, if we hit 41, we got a point, but we were at a 38, so the points that we actually that we get from this index are a fraction of that particular total. So we didn't get the full point. We got 38 divided by 41 is going to give you about 0.93. So the percent of students feeling engaged, the goal was 46. We were at a 43. So again, 43 divided by 46, you're starting to see we didn't get the full point there. Attendance, we want to be at 90%. And that's where we were with Strive for 5 pre-pandemic. That is the threshold that we need to at least be there. That is in life our goal. This year it's 80 because we're coming out of a situation last year where we ended at 70, as did a lot of school districts across the state. Nationwide, chronic absenteeism is double. There were 8 million kids that were chronically absent nationwide. Now there's 16 million. So even though that is our goal, we are at a 77.5. So we didn't get the full points there for this iteration of our index card. We did a kindergarten assessment. If we just did that, this was the first year that we did the kindergarten early assessment with a new type of an assessment that also does monitor social and emotional components. So we did get a point there. And then also for our early learning, they apply an early learning assessment that they lovingly call the DRDP, and they, for the first time this year, they are ensuring that every student is being monitored with this particular assessment. So that was met. Then we have one of the questions on the Gallup poll that says, I feel safe at this school. So 67% was our goal because during the pandemic that went down. And we were at 61, so we didn't get the full point there. The adults at this school care about me. The goal was 70%, and we were at a 66. So again, not the full point. The percent of engaged teachers, you might remember we did the Q12 employee engagement survey, and that was largely made up of our certificated staff, which is our teachers. And not necessarily, the folks that, are food service or our building engineers. They are taking a separate survey. They're not included in this. But that particular survey, our goal actually was 36 and we were at a 37. You may recall that the industry standard for engagement is 32%. This year by Gallup standards, so we are, about 5% above the national percentage in terms of engagement. I know I will graduate from high school. And when we asked our students that, our goal was 85%. and we were at an 81, so we didn't get the full points there. I think this is a significant data point, and I did talk to Dr. Gilpin about this, and she's gonna talk a little bit about our progress to graduation in the academics portion of this meeting. But our graduation rate is right at 76% last year, and that number 81 tracks very close to that. So that gives us, it's one of those instances where data gives us visibility into how might we use that data point. We have to help our kids have confidence, I know I will graduate from high school, and that starts early. When I am angry or upset, I am very good at explaining what is bothering me to other people. And so you'll see a lot of these questions can tag into these categories. And so 35% was the goal. We were at a 32, and so not quite the full point there. When I disagree with other people, I am very good at finding a solution to our problem. So 50% was the goal, and we were at a 45. I am very good at listening to my friends when they are angry or upset about something. So that goes into that empathy piece. So 86 was the goal, and we were at an 83. So there are a couple of additional items. DESE actually is going to be having another one of these statewide board meetings, and they're going to present some more information. I think one of the things that we'll be including in this index is about goal setting and goal attainment. And so those are some components that are on the Gallup poll. And so again, those are items that we can include. And not for nothing, this is also really important at a building level, because each one of them gets their own Gallup poll. So if their students are low in terms of goal setting, or they're low in some of these areas, those are strategies that in conjunction with the counselors, social workers, teachers, other adults in the school can begin working on. So another goal this year was to have social workers at every school, and I talked with Elizabeth about this. I know she's not here today, but we don't necessarily have a 1-to-1 ratio at every school, but what we can say is that every school has reasonable access to a social worker at this time. And we do have counselors at every school, and in fact, Oak Grove, Central, and Carden Park,
And
Lindbergh have 2 counselors.
Hosea.
And Hosea have 2, just because of the population and potential need that has been evidenced. And then we also have, and this was a goal this year as well, and was to have a nurse at every school. And again, access to healthcare is important to social and emotional learning, because it gets you into the pipeline of potentially getting the kind of help that you need from both the physical side, and the mental health side. I guess they're co-joined, but I think you understand the discernment I'm trying to make. So right now, the total points possible are 15. So at this time, we were at a 14.3. So it gives us, again, visibility into the things that we need to continue to work on, and some of the things that are strengths as well. So some items were our strengths, and some of them are certainly opportunities for improvement. But coming out of the pandemic and taking this approach, being informed by what's going on at the statewide level, has been helpful. And having discussions with Ms. Valenti Huff over this has also been helpful, because she's a kind of one of the statewide leading experts in this particular area. So she walked through this with me a few times. And so it's not complete, but I think it is a good step in the right direction for us to have an index like this, not just one that's full of academics.
I like it, but it sure would be nice if number 9 was greater, which impacts the classroom
Yes.
and student hopefulness.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I would agree.
So the points possible, these are goals that we set for ourselves, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. To me, that makes me feel personally a little bit better because if we don't meet that goal, I'd like to see the goal a little bit higher.
Mm-hmm.
And that we always have continuous improvement.
That's the point. Yeah, absolutely.
So my other question, nurses at every school, counselors at every school, social workers at every school, one of the job titles that I think about is reading interventionists.
Mm-hmm.
And I know those are kind of structured a little bit different and regulated because of title schools and non-title schools. But is that something that we can look at in the future as far as either that job title or what are we doing to improve reading at grade level?
Yeah, so Bethany, do you want to hit on that one?
I think that's definitely something we can look at in the future. I think this is a social emotional index, and I think reading interventions falls under like our academic goals and our academic index. And so
Yeah.
I don't want to get off track of social emotional, but I definitely think we can, it's up for discussion. We can look at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But currently it's not on the academic side yet as far as the point system that we're looking at?
Okay, so, yeah, I get what you're saying. So, like on the balanced scorecard,
Yeah.
like we look at mid-year, how are we doing in reading, And we also look at third grade and at their average scale score. I don't know if you guys are kind of thinking through that lens. The other thing that we are going to be doing, and we were gonna do it on the 15th, we didn't have school, but is looking at programs from a reviews perspective, whether that's a gifted program, curriculum advisors, reading interventionist, attendance interventionist. So within that framework, in terms of improvement, so just like the reading interventionist stuff that I showed you earlier today, that's how we're gonna track whether or not that's working or not working.
Okay.
So for reading interventionist, if it's working or not working, we can look at certain data points and through a program review to see if the kids that are 3+ grade levels and below, if that's shrinking, and the other, metrics like 2 grade levels below, 1 grade level below, on grade level, if those are increasing through the year, then the group that's being intervened, like at a tier 3 intervention, would be your 3 grade levels and below. And so that's something that we do look at. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Kendra, what type of, makes me just think through this, what type of metric could you use? Because all of our data is like whole group of individuals and not identified independently. And I think that, it could be a long morning if I start talking about the pro-social, emotional, self-management, self-esteem. These are as important as your academic, I mean, really in the world we're living today. And so how do we ever, because we don't truly have a good metric to intervene for specific kids, big picture, does that make sense? We're communicating academic success when we do any type of progress monitoring. You know what I'm saying? It makes me wonder, what is that tool that we could ever move forward with that?
Well, I
That's
think,
the L side.
yeah, it's because we do have this
Makes sense.
this data down to like a kid level, at the building level, so I think you can intervene there, but I think the behavior interventionist, or is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm just talking big picture, like, I'm just gonna give you an example.
Okay, I'm ready.
I have a stepson that he was very academically strong, but his he's a good boy, his collaboration, and there was never I mean, he's long gone as a graduate, but his communication with his parents, and thank goodness they were in education, you never talked about that skill set with those parents. Does that make sense? It was always the academic communication when you talked, when you spoke.
Yeah, and not really communicating.
It's the whole child.
Yeah,
That's
from
what
a
I'm trying to say.
social, emotional.
And I don't know
metric.
how we get there, but that's critical in the world where we are today.
But that seems like a combination of parent and instructor.
Oh, yeah.
School and parent
Yeah.
working together to
Right.
help that, because a lot of the kids are extrinsically motivated,
Right.
but can't get it intrinsically. You know, so there's nothing inside that pushes them to excel when that's where you want it to be.
Mhm.
Instead of a candy bar here or, you know, pizza day over here, you know, those kind of things.
Mhm.
But, so I'm with you on that, how do we?
Well, part of it, when I
Put
think
that
about
across.
those, and just because we've done some study, what happens is our SEL work sometimes gets pushed to the back side because of our accountability that we're asked on the academic side. And that's what a lot of research at the middle level is, you start dwindling away the minutes that are designed for like the advisory or seminar, which is your SEL typically,
Right.
but we just keep chunking those away because we need more minutes in ELA or we need more minutes in math. Does that make sense?
That's a great point, I think.
Yeah, because we think that's where success lies.
Because that's how we're held accountable, you know?
Right.
Yeah, and I think that this is as important as that in my, I'm not in charge.
No, but that's a well-rounded student, right? That's
Yes,
a
the
well-rounded
whole-
student to be
yes, so
successful
we
out of
chunk
school.
minutes on the other end.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, Katie.
No, I get it. No, it's a perfect point because I've seen Miss Valenti have actually teach a math lesson with this all wrapped into it. And I think Bethany has seen her do it too. I mean, I'll have, and it's just amazing because it's part and parcel with her approach to teaching. And so, but she's worked very hard to earn that ability to wind those things together so that they're one. And back to this too, and talking about research like Dr. Gilpin just brought up, that the higher social emotional level is for kids, the less the chronic absenteeism.
Yeah.
And so that's another piece
Yeah.
of really important, and that this study just recently came out. So really focusing in on that is a really important component.
Yeah, because to me, that's why would a student be engaged if the teacher isn't? So it would take someone to incorporate all of that
Yes.
to re-engage.
And I will point out, like on that teacher engagement, I mean, that's from a Q12 perspective, and so 36 sounds low. But,
Yes.
yeah, but you have to bracket that with kind of the national standard. And if, I pulled some data that was, this teacher, the adults care about me, that's a little better than, what you're seeing from that lens. So they're just different metrics. Like you'd have kilogram, you can weigh mass in kilograms, you can weigh it in pounds, you can weigh it in grams, you can weigh it in a variety of flavors, but it's all still weight, yeah. So I just, that's one of the things that can be tricky about reading this kind of thing.
What do you think about the possibility of adding volunteers to that list? Do the adults in my building care about me? I know every school kind of does something different. But the ones that stand out to me are schools like Edison that are involved with the, what's the church that's right around the corner?
Wellspring.
Things like that, in my opinion, would probably add tremendously to the social emotional health of each student. I remember Mr. Lowenberg used to come and read to us and read with us one-on-one when I was a kid,
Yeah.
And yeah, we're reading, but I don't remember what we read. I remember he was there spending time with me, and
Yeah, and I think that's why they kind of keep that pretty, the adults at this school, I mean,
The question
it's
says, the
general.
adults at the school care about me, so it would
It
be
could be
any
any
adults
adult.
at the school, like it's an overarching kind of question, like, so that they feel like the people that are there care about them.
yeah, so it could include
So it's
them on
not
here.
just instruction.
No.
If that adult is there regularly.
It doesn't say my teacher or my principal, or it just says the
Adults,
adults.
so it could be the custodian, it could be, the people that work in the cafeteria, I mean, it could be, any of those folks that show, that show care to that student. So this is really the crux of showing you the social and emotional index. And we'll continue to work on this and continue to, certainly have discussions about this and how we can add to it. We'll continue to listen to what's going on in the state in terms of curriculum. Like they mentioned, there's a lot for the smaller kids, not so much for the middle level, and nothing at the high school. And I think that continues to be an aim, is that the state would have something, an approach to this, and more structured for school districts to follow. So I think if you don't have any questions about this, we were going to pivot to a couple of additional metrics that are not on our balanced scorecard, but are in our student success index. And we cover most of those items in our balanced scorecard that we went over in the middle of the year, which was, just in December, I believe. December. So, but one of them that we are keeping our eye on is progress to graduation. And so that is something that you have in front of you, and it looks like this. And so Dr. Gilpin was going to talk a little bit about that and how we're tracking that. And Katie, if you have anything on that particular, Katie helps us with so much of our data, so it's always nice when she's here to, just in case we have clarifying questions.
Okay, good. So just looking at the front sheet of this, we really have, I have actually worked with our high schools. We're really focusing right now right on the 12th grade, and there's a few things that if you'll look on the far column there, the WLC, I say the bottom column at the 12th grade, that is our graduate academy, and so they are not working towards credits any longer. They're working through the Missouri options route, and so in terms of not having credits, I would probably put that on the back burner because they don't need those. But I'm waiting on a report back in terms of the number of tests that we have passed so far and where we are in the progress for those kids to receive the Missouri options side of it. So Leah's not got that back to me yet. The other ones, the above 21 credits, they're on pace. So that's a great column that we're doing well there. As far as the 14.1 to 21, they can earn 3.5 credits a semester. And so with great hope that they're at the upper end of that column, and monitoring to see if there's some credit recovery. Some of those students probably do. Some could be right on pace even with the 21. I will tell you that an example though from Lafayette, because they've just turned theirs in, I've asked them to send me a list. I'm probably a little controlling, to be very frank with you, a list of every student that is not on track and what our plan is for that student. And so I want to give you an example of Lafayette. When they have their 14 kids there, Sam sent back, they have kids that are on modified graduation plans. Those would be their students that receive ELL services. And they also have a couple that are on graduating with goals. So those numbers are going to be in there. And they're at the lower end, but they would be on track to graduate. So you have to make sure that that number doesn't necessarily mean that we aren't on the track there. So she sent me their entire list, and they have 2 students that they are really concerned about, and they have plans in place, so I feel better about that. So we're going to be more intentional about making sure that we know it's just not a number, it's every student, and that we're tracking that tight. The other thing I will tell you though is our current practice in this district, I believe, and anybody else can speak up because I'm just learning this, is that when a student isn't with their cohort and ready, they're not meeting the requirement, we have asked them, I believe, to withdraw from school and go through the adult ed route. And when we do that, the adult ed route does not count as a graduate for us unless they come and have the big 3. So they can go adult ed, and then if they've done the government, health, and personal finance, we can re-enroll and they count as a graduate for us. But they're I don't know the percentage that come back, Katie, I don't know if you would know that off the top of your head. So our practice has been not to leave them in, per se, our school setting for a 5th year, and you can. We are supposed to educate our students until they have an opportunity to stay with us until they're 21. So we're working through that to get a little bit more information as far as practices for this district of what is best for our kids, and is it better that we keep them with us for a 5th year through our Missouri options within our own facility if we would choose it through a virtual platform, so that they're graduating from our schools with us and not being a drop. So that's in the works. We're working with Elizabeth Chase, and we're going to we're talking with Independence today about some other practices that are used to keep kids here. So
What's the reasoning behind that?
you know what? I can't answer that. I don't. It's always, I was only in the high school 1 year, so let me just be very open. But typically, our only students that were able to do a 5th year would be our students that received special services. And we only did that as if it was truly maybe a cognitive delay of earning the credits versus if they were not well behaved, then we didn't allow that, our attendance wise. So I don't know, do you know?
I don't know,
I don't know,
from
yeah.
what Gabe has said, it's a philosophical change with past leadership, but we just want to do what's best for every kid, and not every kid fits into that same cookie cutter mold of our education, and so we have to think differently and think creatively, and so I'm excited to meet with Independence today at 2 o'clock, because I think they're going to give us some ideas of what they do, but that's one example of what we're going to do going forward to try and improve our graduation rate.
Well, let me ask this. Does it affect our graduation rate if it takes them an extra year to graduate?
Not if they stay with us.
If they stay with us.
Okay.
But if they drop and go adult ed, then it does impact us. And other school districts are doing things that we're not. So we're missing out on some opportunities to capture that graduation rate. So.
Personally, I haven't researched it, but that makes the most sense to me.
It'd be best for that kid too, to me, to keep them connected with people they already know.
I feel like that once we're going to have the Missouri options opportunity for students within each building. And I think that connection will help us to keep them connected in that capacity. But I also, I think probably part of the philosophical belief for some, and I would be the same, I don't know that we can decide as a district what platform that we would offer that education. I'm not sure that we want 20-year-olds with our 14-year-old, you know what I mean? I think that that's probably the philosophical part of it, of the age gap of being all together in a building. If we continue to let them come on site, or 21 or what have you, they have to.
Is there a separate building, maybe, well, I was gonna say Hilliard's, but they don't have enough space, but any other building?
Maybe within that building.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Maybe even within that building, we just have to think
We have to think,
creatively
yeah.
and
Yeah.
be mindful of all kids.
All of them, right.
But I think it can be
I
done.
do too.
How soon do you think you guys would make a decision on that?
I don't know that it's a decision really to be made, just a practice that we will change going forward. The more that we learn, the more we improve.
Well, yeah, well, how soon do you think you would change the practice though?
I think it's starting now.
Today, we're working on it right now.
That's gotta be a hard one, because you don't want them, 21-year-old with a freshman, in many instances, just,
I think
just
it's-
as little unsettling.
I think it's
However.
going to be probably more of those students that are they've been with us for 4 years and they haven't met, and instead of saying, you need to go this route, I think we can keep them with us. If we've had that relation, if they've stayed with you for 4 years in a building, I would hope that we have that relationship that they would say, I want to be right here and we'll get this done together, would be my hope. I can't imagine anybody staying 4 years and not wanting to cross the
Getting that
finish.
close,
Yeah.
if it's within
So
their grasp.
I think it's just what practices we've had in place, and that's the only way they've done it, I guess.
I would
I'm
agree,
working on that.
just psychologically though, I would think that they probably wouldn't want to be in the same building though. If there was a separate building, somewhere else they can go. You know, you mentioned that maybe they don't want to be with freshmen, or maybe we don't want them with freshmen, and then maybe they don't want to be with freshmen. So psychologically, to me, it makes sense that they would go to a different facility, somewhere within our district, that they can still complete the diploma. But that's just what I think.
Any questions on anything else on graduation rates?
I'd like to, this is one of the topics that I have probably the most conversation about. To me, I would just like more information over the next couple of months about that specifically, and what you guys come up with, how you may have arrived at that answer. Maybe even it's a possible information item on the agenda. I don't know if we're talking enough about it, that's just my opinion.
That's just difficult, trying to come up with ways to encourage them to stay the course, to invest in themselves, to get there, to not have to backtrack or add more, but just to stay engaged as you go, knowing that boom, it's all over now. I think that's the difficult.
I think though, as we look at different pathways for our students, individualized,
I think
that
that's
should, because everybody doesn't fit a traditional 7-period.
Yeah, and I love the
class.
Hilliard
So,
bit,
yeah.
you know,
So,
I-
a variety of avenues, if we really think different about opportunity for everyone in different routes, I think that would hopefully capture them and engage them and to stay as well. So that'll be our vision.
Okay, so real quick, we got 3 minutes, would be our ICAP data. Okay, so this is something that is also on our student success index, and it shows up on the new MSIP 6 APR, our annual performance report. Sorry, I just kind of got an email pulled up from Elizabeth, because she's not here today, but at mid-year, the data she pulled, and this is the individual career plans that our 8th graders make as they head into high school. We're at 80.5%. The issue with that is we've got to be at least 90 to get any points at all from the state. And so I know they're working hard at the middle level. They're concerned about attendance. So if the kids aren't there, how do you make a plan? So I've asked, and I'm gonna be talking more with Elizabeth and certainly Dr. Gilpin too, like that we would get a list of those names that we don't have accomplished yet, and how are we going to get that accomplished? Because we need to ensure that our kids have those plans and no excuses. We gotta find a way. So if we can find a kid at Lafayette that hasn't shown up for 80 days and connect with his grandma, we can get these 8th graders to get these plans made. It needs to be done. And that's something that we're gonna have to work on. And while we don't necessarily control attendance, we have to be creative and innovative and find ways that we make these plans. If we have to start in 7th grade, we have to start in 7th grade. So anyways, that's something that we're working on, something they're continuing to do. We're gonna have to really focus in on that as we head to the end of 2023. Because that is going to show up on our annual performance report. And we don't want to be the school district that doesn't have that accomplished.
So what does the ICAP acronym stand for?
Individual Career Advanced Plan, something right around in that zone there.
Okay.
So that's not something that, you know, it's supposed to be done, but I don't think it's something that we've had a real laser-like focus on, so we're
And that's
hoping.
8th grade.
Uh-huh.
being done by 8th grade. And then is there a plan for how you track it throughout the remainder of the years?
Yeah, the high school counselors are supposed to review
Okay.
the ICAP. And I'm hoping that we're going to, we have a career course right now. State coach. But I'm hoping that, so we're working on the master schedules at middle level right now. And we're going to have all 8th grade have a career course. But our goal is to really get exposure out in all of the career and technical fields and really be more intentional of taking our students out to, whether it's Hilliard's, whether it's going to see the pros start in high school, whatever it might be, a lot more exposure. So my hope is that their ICAP becomes more, I guess, meaningful. And so I believe, like I can see it next year, that when they're completing the ICAP at the middle level with their school counselor, it's done within that careers coursework, because, I mean, really, that whole ICAP is the tracker of what high school courses I need to take to get where I need to be. And I don't believe that when they roll in, that they really focus on the ICAP. They go in like, this course looks fun, or I like the teacher, what have you. And it even holds true for our students that are taking the advanced coursework. A lot of times they're taking advanced coursework because they're chasing, and I'm not saying in a negative, but they want a point because they want to have a high ranking, class ranking, versus taking coursework that really is in line for what they're doing at the next. And that conversation happened with through Missouri Western, our dual credit. We have kids that are paying dollars, and parents are paying money, coursework that they don't need out of the core 42. So I think the ICAP should help us with that, don't you? Okay. So it's more meaningful.
I used to tour about 800 8th graders through Hilliard Tech and talk careers. And it was one of my favorite parts of my job there. But we were using Missouri Connection, where they do a self-assessment and it kind of says you should be a this or that.
They still
I took it myself and it's very spot on.
Yeah.
It's a good tool to help them plan a career.
Yeah, our hope is to be more than, the tours are great, but like really, even if they get to go for a day or two and experience if they're interested in that particular, should be good,
Yeah.
I hope.
So then the Missouri assessment is similar to the ASVAB. Now, my mind goes there just because it's a scope of different interests. So that's how I hear what you're saying for the 8th grader, is present a broad scope of opportunity to kind of pinpoint where their interests are and how to steer them there.
Yes, that's our goal.
Which increases the
I would-
hope, right?
Yes.
It does.
It does.
Attachment, engagement, the whole thing.
I think it
That's
would
it,
be
it's hope.
really hard for a counselor or a teacher to talk careers when really all they've done is education. And so it's really hard to, I think you have to use outside resources.
Yeah, and that's is to bring in and take out and do the whole, like it really.
I went to Webster, they had the alternative graduation group there. And I can remember after I did a presentation, teachers following me out there going, how do I get in radiology? Or I was like,
I did though, actually, we had PD station, talk about the Hilliard.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Yeah, so one of our breakout sessions for our teachers was exposure to Hilliards and their programs. So Jill and Chris led Hilliard tours for our teachers in the work and programs that they have from pre-K to 12. So that way teachers have the opportunity to go back and then they can actually have conversations. Some of these programs happen in silos. And teachers, like I was a classroom teacher for 20 years, I didn't know what happened. Reba led us on tours when I was going through Hilliards and stuff, but that was only because I taught 8th grade.
And so I wanted our 4th, our 5th, our 6th grade
Yes.
teachers to have that exposure.
It's
And
good.
again, it was so nice. We were at senior night last night at Benton, and one of our seniors alluded to the fact that they were thankful for the apprenticeship program.
That was awesome.
And so, again, just which leads to Dr. Lau's thing about I have hope, I have
Yes.
passion to get something that I
Yeah.
want.
Or I believe I will graduate
Yeah.
from high school.
I
Yeah.
think there's a direct correlation from the hope to our academic achievement.
Mhm.
Oh, well, I do too.
Yeah.
I mean, even the percents are like,
Yeah.
Mhm.
I agree.
Can we see a pie chart or a graph or something that breaks down where each, so you got all these 8th graders who are, we want to be career ready. We want everyone to be career ready by the time they graduate. You know, me personally, I like to see a pie chart of where do these kids fit, you know? What percentages maybe want to be educators, or maybe what percentage possibly want to go into trades, maybe what specific trades they may want to go in. You know, that helps me personally wrap my mind around what we're working with. And then it also might help you guys see where we need to put more energy.
Does that test that you mentioned, the 8th graders take, does that give the
It's gonna
data
give
that
you the
way?
pathways, and that's what I
Yes.
think is
That
the
might
key
be
for us is,
yeah.
there's the pathway, but when I go to a great example, if I would go over to the Guard over the Rosecrans, they have all kinds of opportunities, but our kids have no idea. And so until they truly are,
Certainly.
like even the healthcare field, they think of nurse or doctor, they don't think bigger, like all of the opportunities within healthcare that you can do. And so that's part of, I think we can get down to the path side, but truly, what are they thinking? That really comes more once they have the exposure and through the ICAP, but we could probably pull from the middle level through the Missouri, like all their different paths.
Missouri Connections.
This is gonna be the
You can
paths.
pull a
Yeah,
report and
by
it'll
kid,
show.
yeah. But
Like
it's not
how
in-
many students are going into medical or
Yeah.
ag or
Interest,
Right,
general
the
categories.
high level.
yes, yeah, yeah.
So those were the topics that we kind of had on deck for today, so.
I'm more hopeful.
Good!
No, after our last meeting, the percent of hopeful students was overwhelming, but at least we're looking at it.
Oh, yeah. And we look at it every year.
So the chart that you had with the points, our goal setting,
Mm-hmm.
can we get a copy of that?
Sure. I can get that to Donna. Would that be
Yeah,
reasonable?
and I'll just email it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be good,
Yeah,
or
it's-
attach it to the minutes.
Mhm.
That'd be great. And then one last question, on this DLO, was this you?
I'm a DLO, I'm Laura.
Oh, I'm sorry, Laura.
DLO's gone.
She's gone. Laura, could we get an idea, like at least from sophomore and junior, like where it says 0 to 7, how many are like at 2 or 3 or
Yeah, I can.
like how bad
Yeah, how
is
bad?
it? This range is a little broad,
Right, no, I can.
just curious.
Yes.
Because I look at that and that's not too hopeful if you're one of those juniors
Mm-mm.
that are way
Could be a
short.
little overwhelming.
MB would have that. There.
Hmm?
MB would.
Oh, I know that,
Oh,
I have the
okay.
list of
Okay.
names, I know
Oh, you got
exactly
it.
where it
Okay.
is, but I'm thinking,
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Well, the time is 10:10, and we'll go ahead and call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.